Welcome to A Change of Heart podcast. I'm your host, Angel Walston. And in this space, we navigate life together. We ask the hard questions like, what is the truth you haven't told? But most importantly, we grow together. And sometimes that leads to a change of heart. Hey everyone, welcome back to A Change of Heart podcast. I am your host, Angel. And if you're tuning in for the first time, hey girl, hey, welcome to the potty. And if you're a returning listener, hey girl, welcome back. Thank you for joining me. Today we are going to be talking about, girl, get back into alignment. And listen, I always say that the message hits the messenger first. And this one is for me, okay? If this episode is not for anyone else, this message is for me. And I told y'all I haven't really been feeling like doing the question of the day. And I said sometimes we'll just do kind of like a story time. So I'm going to share kind of a story time that's going to lead into what we're talking about today. Cool? So this topic came from my experience from this past week at the Woman Evolve conference. And it was a great experience. Let me tell y'all, the way it was a struggle to get to that conference, like I wouldn't say we had so many issues, but it's like literally our first night there, our Airbnb didn't have AC. We're literally like going back and forth until 1:30 in the morning trying to get that situated. And it was just so frustrating that we were all like, Sarah has to have a word for us. Like, there has to be something at this conference that is like about to be life-changing, because just all of the frustration that we experienced at landing was crazy. So I'll say this. A lot of people have asked me like, oh, how was the conference? What did you think of it? Would you go back? And listen, I feel like it's one of those things that you have to experience for yourself. We had a good experience. I will be honest with you, if you are someone who has social anxiety, or if you're someone who like large crowds is a lot for you, I don't want that to dissuade you, but it's a lot, okay? I'm gonna be honest about that. There were, I think she said 40,000 women who registered, and I feel like it was even more than that who were actually in the building. It's a lot, y'all. Like, it was like shoulder to shoulder at some points. But once you're like at your seat, it's not bad. It's just kind of like the navigating the in and out of it. But anywho, the thing that really got me was the first night of the conference. There was a worship night, and then Pastor Sarah preached, which we were not expecting. We thought it was just going to be like worship with Naomi and Chandler, but she did end up preaching at the end of worship, and her topic was on take your form. And she was reading from the scripture in Esther, where it's like, Esther, maybe you were like created for this moment, for such a time as this. And I can just truly say, like, out of all of the 3 days, like the conference itself was great, but night one was all I needed, honey. Like that got done what I needed. And I was telling one of my friends, just leaving from the conference, like it really did just like encourage me and inspire me to like get back into my rightful position, to get back into alignment, and to really be who God has called me to be. And so with that, that's what is leading us to today's topic about, girl, get into alignment. Like, it's time for us to get back into our rightful position, get back into the place that we have always supposed to have been. And I want to share some of the revelations that I've had for myself that I needed to be honest with myself about, that I needed to address, to help me to be able to be like, okay, these are some blocks that I've had that have kept me in a place of contentment. And I won't even say contentment, but almost complacency, and that have kept me in a place to not be in alignment, and things that I want to be intentional about acknowledging and addressing going forward. So the first thing that really hit me, which I was sharing with two of my friends, is that I feel like I have stepped back in a lot of ways for a number of reasons. It's not necessarily one specific reason. There's been a combination of reasons as to why I've stepped back a lot, to some extent when it comes to ministry, and then also just personal things that I was doing as well. I've obviously continued with the podcast, but many of you know I have stepped back from Change Hearts, and that's kind of a different reason. We'll talk about that at a later time. But a lot of the other things that I previously done, I have taken a step back from. And I realized, like, in full transparency, a part of it for me was that it felt at times like I was doing too much. And there have just been times where I felt like I was just always doing, like literally always doing, in spite of when I wasn't feeling well, having different things going on family wise, just having like all of these different factors that was weighing on me, and me still showing up, me still doing, me still saying yes to things when I didn't really want to do it. And I found myself in a position not necessarily feeling burned out, but almost feeling resentful at times. And I don't want to feel like that, obviously, but the revelation that I had recently is that it's not a matter of me doing too much. It's not a matter of it being a burden. It's a matter of me having a lack of boundaries. And the reason why I say that is because I have a bad habit of saying yes because I don't want to say no, but I don't be wanting to say yes either. But it's easier for me to say yes than to be like, I don't want to do that. And that is an area that I'm like really, really, really trying to be more intentional about, this year specifically, about establishing healthy boundaries and being okay with my no being no, and not always feeling like I have to explain why I'm saying no. If this is not something that I have the capacity for, if this is not something that I simply just don't want to do, if this is not an area that I want to serve in, it's okay for me to say no. And I feel like just with people pleasing, honestly, I have allowed myself to stay in situations, and this goes beyond church. This isn't specific to church, but I have allowed myself to stay in situations that simply do not serve me and is not the place that I need to be in right now. But I'm doing all of these things. And as a result of me doing all of these things that I don't want to do, that I've said yes to, that really is not the position that I'm supposed to be in, has now put me in a position where I'm too tired or I don't feel like doing the stuff that I'm actually supposed to be doing. We're not continuing that. We're not going into 2024 with that mentality. But the thing is, it's not a church thing. It's not a work thing. It's not a relationship thing. It is a boundary thing, and that's a me issue. I think a lot of times, we'll say specifically when it comes to church, a lot of people will talk about how, the church has done this, the church has done that. And let me be clear, the church has its fault, okay? I'm not trying to sit here and minimize that by any means. Church hurt is very much so a real thing. But with that, I also think there are certain circumstances, I'm not saying in all cases, in certain circumstances, there have been people where you keep focusing on the issue that you feel like is the church issue, and you jump from church to church and finding something wrong somewhere else when really it's a boundary issue. It's like, any church you go to, you may experience this, but you have to establish boundaries. You have to communicate. You have to have certain expectations. And so for me, that's something that I've realized early on, being in ministry for a long time now, is realizing like it's really important for me to establish boundaries, because it is easy to get burned out. It is easy to get frustrated. It is easy to say yes and take on everything just because you have the ability to do it. And that's something that I struggle with as being someone who is multifaceted, that I have a lot of different gifts that I'm able to operate in. I have a tendency to say yes just because I am capable of doing it. That may not be where my calling is in this season. That may not be what I'm supposed to be doing right now. And even though I may be doing quote unquote good work, I'm still out of alignment because it's not what I'm supposed to be doing. So with that, for any of you who may have been feeling like that as well, I want to challenge you with this question. Are you really burned out, or have you not established healthy boundaries? Because you can feel like you're burned out in a situation when it's not a matter of you being burned out. You aren't even supposed to be there. It's like, Ariana, what are you doing here? You're not even supposed to be there, but you're doing all of these things because you're kind, you got a good heart, you want to help people, you mean well. There's nothing wrong with that. But some of us are in a season where we are being seat fillers in seats that are not for us. And we are hindering other people from stepping up, stepping into their rightful position and them being in alignment because we're saying yes to everything that we ain't even supposed to be doing. We're saying yes, we ain't consulting God about anything. We're just out here doing stuff. And so you have now made it so that somebody else is not in their rightful position because you're occupying a seat, you're occupying a space that you're no longer supposed to fill. And that is okay. I think it can be really challenging to say no and to establish boundaries in a place that you like, in a place that you have relationships, like healthy relationships with people. But consider the fact that if it really is a healthy relationship, you saying no or you establishing a boundary, it should not break that relationship. You should be able to have that conversation and say, hey, I'm no longer able to act in this way, or I'm no longer able to participate in this. I'm no longer able to be over this, and find your space. Find where you fit, find your groove. Me and one of my close friends were talking the other day and just talking about how we are overdoing things that we're doing it because it's what we've always done. We're doing it because it's like, well, it's like we've committed to it. And it's like, I'm very big on being a woman of your word. And that is to a fault. And I will acknowledge that. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. So if I commit to something, even if I don't want to do it later on, I've said I was going to do it. So I'm going to show up. I'm going to get the job done. This is a season where you cannot afford to stay in places that you are no longer supposed to be in. And I'm accepting that for myself. And that was a harsh reality for me because I don't like, I wouldn't even say conflict because it's not a thing of conflict, but I don't like having to go back and be like, oh, hey, I can't, or I'm not able to, or I don't want to do this. I do struggle with that at times, not across the board. But it's interesting because there are some things somebody said, I'm like, absolutely not, immediately no. And there are other things inside, I'm like, I don't want to do this. And they're like, you want to do it? Yeah, I'll do it. And it's like, why do we do this? Like, what is wrong with you? So it's just a matter of being able to have the hard conversation with yourself to acknowledge and realize, like, hey, I need to say no. I need to establish healthy boundaries. And I need to be honest with myself to say, like, okay, if this isn't something that I have the capacity for, or if this is something that is keeping me from doing what I know I'm supposed to be doing in this season, I got to reevaluate. Because if it's keeping you from doing what you're supposed to be doing, are you really supposed to be doing that thing? You see what I'm saying? Like, if you have all these other things, all these other factors that are hindering you from having the energy, motivation, want to, desire, whatever, to do the thing that you're actually called to, the thing that you have a burden for, the thing that you have a passion for, really ask yourself, am I supposed to be doing all these other things if it's keeping me from the thing that I know is a God thing, the thing that I know I'm supposed to be doing? If you can answer that honestly, and the answer is, yeah, girl, it is a problem, you got to reevaluate, and you have to have those conversations and to establish those boundaries to back up, to step forward, whatever it may be, for you to be able to be in alignment and to do the thing that you need to do. The next revelation that I had was also being honest with yourself about how you feel about what you're supposed to be doing, what being in alignment looks like for you. And I want to be really honest about this because I wrestle with this every once in a while. Sometimes I'm like really all in with it, and then other times I'm like, bruh, why me? Like, why I gotta do this? And I think let's have some real transparency right here. I think that there are times, specifically in your relationship with God, in your walk with Christ, where you have moments where it's like, God, why did you pick me for this? Like, why do I have to be the chain breaker? Why do I have to be the one to break all the generational curses? Why do I have to be the one? And we have this woe is me moment. We have these pity parties, and we can feel like at times, like, I just want to be normal. You know what I mean? Like, you feel like, I want to be able to do what everybody else is doing and not feel some type of way, not experience conviction, right? It's like you get into a space where you feel like you're doing all the right things. We've talked about this before. And I don't want to say you feel like you have nothing to show for it, but it's like, I've done all the right things, but I have nothing to show for it, And you you get into your feelings and you want to stay there for a long time, because we have these moments where it's like, I don't want to be called. I don't want to be the anointed one. I don't want to be the go-to one. I don't want to be the one that everybody comes to for advice. I need somebody to go to advice for. Like, you get to a place at times where it feels like that, and you get pulled out of it. Don't get me wrong. You don't want to stay in that space. But if we were honest, like, you have those moments sometimes, and I have those moments sometimes as well. And God does have to remind me at times that it's like, first of all, you're not the only one. So, like, humble thyself, but also consider it a privilege and not a burden, while also accepting that, yes, you could be normal, but when you accept Jesus as your Savior, you're set apart. You're called to be different. Like, we're called to look differently, to be differently from this world, the things of this world, the image of this world. And it can be challenging at times. I would be lying if I said otherwise, when it feels like the people of the world are prospering. It seems like everything is working out for them. It doesn't appear that they're facing any test trials or anything else. And you really can get to a place where it's just like, but God, I'm doing all of this. And it's like, for what, And I think it's important to have that level of transparency, because there are a lot of people who feel like that, and they feel guilty to say that out loud, myself included. And you feel like, I don't want it to come across like I'm ungrateful. I don't want it to come across like, God, I'm not in this anymore. It's like, I ain't trying to be saved anymore, because it's not that at all. And it's not even a thing of like, I don't want to be called anymore. Like, I don't want to, be in this position. But you do have those moments where you question it. You do have those moments where it feels very heavy, and it feels like you are carrying all of that weight by yourself. And you do have to be reminded at times and like rerouted back, not even to reality, but back into the reality of who God is, and knowing that He is carrying the yoke with you. Like, He's carrying the weight with you, literally. He has not put you in the position that you are in for you now to carry all of this pressure and weight by yourself, and for you to figure it out alone. And we can lose sight of that at times when we're in the thick of it, when we're right in the middle of what feels like a deserted island that we are never going to get out of, where it feels like we cannot see the light at the end of the tunnel. And it can feel very lonely. It can feel very frustrating. It can feel very confusing. It can feel very conflicting. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that, because if I'm being fully transparent, the moments that I have allowed myself to stay in that mindset for too long, the result of it is then I became rebellious. It's like, I don't want to be obedient. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. And once I got to the end of that and realized like, hey man, I was tripping, and I know who I am. I don't know why I'm out here acting like I don't know who I am. Let me get myself back into alignment. Let me get myself back into the place that I'm supposed to be in, because child, what are we doing? Like, what is really going on here? And you don't want it to get to the point where you become so rebellious that you can't come back, because that's a dangerous territory for us to be in. And you don't want to keep playing with that, thinking that you can do this, you can do that, you can say whatever, you can be this, you can be that, and just think, well, I'll just repent later and I'll come back to God. You are putting yourself in a position where it's like, one, what if you don't get the opportunity to repent later and come back to God? But also, you don't realize, like, it's very easy to fall back into sin. It's very hard to get out of it. It is very hard to get out of it. And we convince ourselves at times that we have so much willpower. Our willpower is so strong. If I'm in this position, I'm going to talk myself out of it. I'm going to get up. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And it's very easy for all of that to go out of the window when you're in that situation. Like, I think it's really important for us to be mindful and be aware of that, because we can think that we are stronger than what we actually are. And we can put ourselves in a position where we end up in a place that it takes a long time to be delivered from. It takes a long time to get the breakthrough from that. And let me be clear, there are any situation, any instance where God can deliver you and pull you out in a second, and you don't even have the memory of it, the taste of it, or anything else. That can happen. I will never deny that, never negate it. I've seen it done before. But there are also some lessons that we have to sit in. We know with the Israelites, they were wandering through the wilderness for 40 years because of their disobedience. It didn't have to take that long. There was a point where they were in captivity because of their disobedience. It ain't have to be like that. But there are some things that we have to go through, that we have to experience, because we have made a choice, because we've allowed ourselves to remain in disobedience instead of returning back to God. And so for me, that it was a reminder to return back again. And I think sometimes when you've been in ministry for a long time, it can feel awkward to go up for an altar call. It can feel awkward, especially when you're the one that be praying for people. Like, it can feel awkward to be in that position. It can feel awkward to be in a space where it's like you need the support that you are normally the one giving it. And it can feel awkward to even say, like, I need to return back to God myself. Like, I need to have like a rededication. I need to have a renewed yes with God. However, that's a part of the journey. That's a part of our relationship with God. I don't care what your title is. I don't care how long you've been holy. I don't care how long you've been in this thing. You're going to have to return back to God. You're going to still have to repent. You're still going to have moments where you don't get it right. You're still going to have moments where you make mistakes, and you have to return to God. The thing is, as believers, as we mature, as we grow in our relationship with God, the return period has to get quicker. Like, we should not allow ourselves to stay out of alignment for so long. We should not allow ourselves to be aware and acknowledge that we are out of place. We are out of order. We are not in our rightful position. We are out of alignment, and be okay with that. When you allow yourself to be okay with that, your conviction has been tampered with. It's like you have to be mindful of those things and consider that. So I want to encourage you, for those of you who have been in the thick of it for a long time, for those of you who have been running for Jesus a long time and you are a little tired, I want to encourage you to turn back. I want to encourage you to return back to him. Return your heart back to him. Return your mind back to him. Return your purity back to him. Return your finances back to him. Return your eating habits back to him. Return it all back to him. Give God another chance and allow him to really come in and do the work that you have been frustrated with, that you have been fighting, that you have been avoiding. Allow him to come back in and do that, because he's literally the only one that can carry the weight with you. He's literally the only one that can give you the supernatural strength that you need to endure and to persevere when you want to give up, when you're tired, when you don't want to do this, when you're frustrated, when it doesn't make sense, when you don't understand, when you feel like you have cried your last tear and you see no change. He's literally the only one that can lift you up out of that. He's literally the only one that can help you to get through that. So don't feel like you got to put on. Don't feel like I'm too big for this or I'm too that. Girl, get back into alignment. Do what you need to do to make sure that you're in your rightful place with God, and don't worry about what people are going to think. Don't worry about what people are going to have to say. Their thoughts and opinions, it does not matter. So do what you need to do to make sure that you're in your rightful place and the place that you need to be. All right, last thing, you have to stop running. You have to stop running. I realized at the conference I guess it was probably Saturday, as we were wrapping up, just kind of like thinking about everything. I realized that although I am still doing things when it comes to ministry, I am also in a space where I have been trying to just kind of coast for a while. I've been trying to, I wouldn't even say do the bare minimum because I don't think that's fair. However, probably close to it. And I know that what I've done is not the limit. It's not the end game for me. And I think for a really long time, I felt like I was in a period of transition and just not knowing what that transition was, what that looked like. And I'm still in that period of transition. But with that, there's this feeling of like, I know there's more, but I'm not actively pursuing the more. And even to say that is like, but it's the truth. And I found myself lately like, Angel, you know you can go deeper, right? Like, you know there's more. You know that this in itself is not it. And I have been okay with coasting. And that's problematic. I'm going to be honest about that. I have been okay with just coasting at the pace that I've been doing what I've been doing what is easy, doing what is comfortable, doing what is known. And it's crazy because it's like when you get pushed out of your comfort zone, the new place that was uncomfortable eventually becomes comfortable because you eventually figure that out. You eventually feel like you have some kind of idea of what you're doing. It becomes something that becomes second nature for you. And so you end up getting to a place of just being really complacent where you are and complacent and different and just kind of going through the motions with it. And I realized that I have been trying to run and avoid the more. And I know that there are others of you who are in a place where it's like, you know what you're supposed to be doing and you haven't given God your yes yet. You know what you're supposed to be doing and you found yourself running because I don't know what this is going to look like. You're afraid of what people are going to say, what they're going to think. You're wondering, are you going to have the support? If I do this, are people going to show up? Are they going to have my back? You have all of these different factors that are influencing you staying where you are. And something a therapist said to me a while ago in relation to something completely different is everything comes with a cost. You always have to count your costs, not just if I do this, but also what happens if I don't do this? What is the cost associated with that? What is the consequence associated with that? And only you can answer it for yourself because the cost is not going to be the same across the board. You have to answer for yourself. If I make a decision to not do, if I make a decision to not show up, to not be in alignment, to not be in my rightful position, what is the cost of that? What are the consequences associated with that? Because it's very easy to focus on like, if I step out, if I do this, if I show up in this way, oh my gosh, this could go wrong, that could go wrong, this could happen. All of these different things that we will focus on, the negative regarding that. But we don't always take the time to answer the question, what is the cost of me not being who God told me to be? That's heavy, y'all. Like when you really think about that, that's a heavy question to sit with. And I am in a space where I'm really trying to navigate that and really trying to be intentional about like, okay, God, I've done all these things already. So what's next? And in me not knowing what's next, how do I even prepare for it? Like, what am I supposed to be doing right now? And I remember Stephanie Gretzinger, she said before, whenever you feel like you don't know what your next steps are, what you're supposed to be doing next, always go back to the last instruction that God gave you. And that is something that I really do hold near and dear to my heart whenever I feel like I'm in a space where it's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't know, like, and sometimes I don't necessarily still have an answer for it, but it's a really helpful place to start at and to really start just thinking about, okay, where do I go from here? If I don't have that answer, have I completed my last instruction? Have you all ever taken, I don't know if it's like a quiz test or whatever, but I remember being in college and maybe even high school where they would give us this paper with like a list of instructions on it. And the first instruction or whatever's like at the top of the page, it always said, read through all the instructions before you start. And so every instruction, it was maybe like 10 instructions or something, but every instruction had something that you were supposed to do. So as we are sitting there, you would see people getting up. So like, say if the first instruction was like, you will draw a circle on this paper or something, and you see people starting to draw a circle. Then the second instruction is, now go over and take the pen from the person next to you. You go over and do that. And you have all of these different instructions. And by the time you get to the last instruction, it's something along the lines of, now you don't have to do any of this. So pretty much it was like, if you would have followed the instructions, started and read through all of the instructions before you started anything, you will have seen that you didn't have to do any of that, right? That's how it is with us as we are in our relationship with God. Some of us, he has given us instructions, and because we haven't got to the last instruction, we found ourselves doing a whole lot of things that we didn't even have to do. We found ourselves struggling with a lot of different tests, of different trials, different things, burdens, stumbling blocks that we wouldn't have had to if we would have waited for the next instruction, if we would have listened to the last instruction, or even the first instruction. That's a revelation itself. Sometimes it's not even about going back to the last thing that he said. What was the first thing that he said? In regards to whatever the focus is, whatever the topic is that you're trying to get instruction and direction for, what was the first thing that he said? Was the first thing that he told you, be still and know that I am God? Trust that I'm going to take care. Trust that I'm going to provide. Trust that I'm going to make a way. You're moving to an area that you don't know, that's unfamiliar, or even if it's familiar, but it just ain't where you want to be. But trust that I have a plan even in that desolate place. Trust that I have a plan, that even though you may be being uprooted, I still have a plan. And it's not just for the people attached to you, but the plan is also for you. Can we talk? We're going to go in this direction. There are some of you that are in a season right now where your transition is attached to someone else, and it took you a minute to get on board. Can we talk about that? Your transition is attached to somebody else giving God their yes, somebody else being obedient to God, and you weren't on board with it initially. And for some of you, this may be a result of a marriage. This may be a result of your children. This may be a result of work. This may be a result of family, whatever it might be. But you're being uprooted. Your life is changing as a result of someone else's yes, and you have been wrestling to get on board with it. And you may feel like that person gave a yes, and this is impacting me. And you feel like you're going to a new place that where do I fit in here? What am I supposed to be doing? What am I called to do here? Because I get how you're called to do this here. I get why you're supposed to be here. But God, where am I? How do I fit into this picture? How do I fit into this place? Because if it were up to me, I wouldn't have wanted to come. I wouldn't want to be in this situation. But I believe who you gave the yes to. And I know that is where they're supposed to be. And I'm going along because I know I'm supposed to be with that person as well. But I don't get it. I don't get what you have here for me, God. My prayer is that God will reveal that to you as well. And I also want to encourage you in letting you know that the blessing, the promise, what was spoken, it wasn't just for the person that you followed, that it's also for you. When we look in the scripture of Ruth, we know that Ruth followed her mother-in-law, Orpah. She followed her after her son died. And Ruth left everything behind her. She left her own family. She left the things that she knew to follow her mother-in-law. And we see the blessing of that she got with Boaz. We see everything being restored. And so I want to encourage you, even though this is not the path that I intended to go down, I want to encourage you that even though you may be in a space where you don't understand the why, the what, the how of who you're following, but you know you're supposed to follow that person. You know that God has connected you for whatever reason, and you know you're supposed to go where they go. I want to encourage you and letting you know that the blessing is not just for the person that you follow. The promise is not just attached to nor associated with the person that you follow, but it's also for you. And don't allow yourself to lose sight of that because you can't see the full picture right now. Don't allow yourself to feel like this isn't what I wanted. This isn't what I asked for. This isn't what I signed up for. know that God also had you in mind when he gave the other person the instruction. He also had you in mind. And I want to encourage you with that. And on that note, we're going to end on that because I think that's a good place to stop. So I really do hope that this encouraged you all. I hope that it inspired and empowered you all to get back into alignment and to believe God at his word. Believe him as he is, and believe that he has not forgotten about you. He has not overlooked you. He is not upset with you. You're never too far gone. You are never too far gone. Ask me how I know. Like, you're never too far gone for God. And when we return, he always meets us. He always meets us. There's a song that that Pastor Sarah and Chandler Moore wrote for the conference called On Time God. And it's the chorus is on time God, you love the impossible. On time God, you love doing miracles. You never give up. You're never too late. Nothing's too far gone for the on time God. You always show up. And that last part had me in tears. You always show up. You always show up, God. Even in the moments where we feel like we're too gone, when it feels like, man, God don't care about this. You always show up. And just how he always shows up for me, he will also show up for you. So I hope you all have an amazing week. Until next time, don't forget, be whole, be healed, be authentic. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning into A Change of Heart podcast. I hope you were encouraged, and please take a moment to share with a girlfriend, and don't forget to download the episode. Lastly, I would love to connect with you. You can follow me on Instagram at Angel C. Walston and at A Change of Heart podcast. Have an amazing week, and don't forget, be whole, be healed, and be authentic.